can I borrow against my Ether to buy more Ether? And then if Ether drops too much, I get instantly liquidated, which would cause Ether to drop more, which would cause someone else to get liquidated.
That's a really good question, yeah. So you can definitely leverage up like that. You can kind of deposit Ether, borrow LUSD, sell it for Ether, redeposit, and kind of increase your ETH exposure. So you can actually leverage up. You can do that up to like 11x leverage in our system by kind of going through that leverage cycle a few times. It doesn't affect the price of Ether because our system actually gets the external price of Ether from the market. So we use an external data provider that like feeds in the Ether price to our system. We don't like sort of have some internal measure of Ether price like they would on, say, a centralized exchange where they're actually, the trading is occurring on such an exchange and they have their own kind of Ether price.
But if you're very big, doesn't it affect the price of Ether?
Yeah. If we got big enough such that like the majority of Ether was in our system, yes, then there'll be this kind of like extra effect. We're not quite that big yet. So it's like, I think less than 1% of all Ether is in Liquity. But, that'd be like a very kind of...
Yeah, but
aren't... One of the reasons why we chose Ether, actually, because it is such a big liquidity pool and it's good for collateral.
But aren't there a lot of protocols like you, like stablecoins that do something similar like this? So that maybe in all stablecoins there is a lot of Ether locked up like this, or is that not the case?
Yeah, there are. It's a good question. Like what the aggregate impact would be of all these kind of lending protocols. I mean, Ether is not only used in lending protocols; it's on exchanges. It's in different places. I think like the ecosystem as a whole kind of balanced because there's borrowing, lending, saving, trading. Ether's used like for NFTs and payments and things like that. So it's quite diverse. But yeah, I think that there is a risk, like if it all got too concentrated in one kind of product, that could happen. Yeah.
So the way I looked at it first is because when I started looking into this, I was definitely thinking about the same type of questions that were just asked in the chat, in the sense that I was thinking from a financial stability kind of perspective. And what we have seen in financial markets in 2007, 2008, which completely collapsed, is actually something rather similar to what you're doing, in the sense that there came into force, or into something new was invented, which was market-based banking. And what market-based banking, a big part of that are repo markets, and I think this is fairly similar in a way to what's happening in repo markets, in the sense that you can borrow very liquid money by posting, excess collateral, some an illiquid asset. And what you did see in repo markets, and what you also, for example, saw in repo markets during COVID in 2019, I think, or 2020, 2020, I guess, that you saw this very big and sudden collapse in U.S. treasuries, which was very strange because, I even owned U.S. treasuries at the time, because this is usually a very safe asset. This is the safest asset you can have from a global currency perspective. And then a lot of economists sort of came up with, why is this happening? Well, because repo markets have gotten so big that a small drop in US treasuries caused sort of all of that collateral to no longer be sufficient. And hence, people had to close their positions. And to do that, they had to sell more treasuries. And so that would suppress the treasury price even further. And that would cause even more collateral that needed to be sold. Like, you can see how that might form a positive feedback loop. And I wonder if this also might be the case, if a lot of protocols are there like you, right? If you get big enough.
Yeah, if a big enough chunk of the total Ether supply is kind of used as collateral in lending protocols, then yeah, I think that risk probably does increase. Just in terms of like our individual system, I would say we're quite protected against the need to kind of actually sell off the collateral, because we have this part of the system called a stability pool. And that's almost like an insurance pool where people can deposit their LUSD. And when liquidations occur, it's that pool that will buy the collateral and clear the debt. So it's kind of like the funds are already there and ready to buy the collateral. And the reason why people like to deposit there is primarily because, well, partly we kind of issue LQTY tokens as a kind of incentive to deposit there. But we also, it's basically like when a liquidation occurs at like below 110% but above 100%, it's actually profitable for whoever receives that collateral, because they clear the debt, but they make more in collateral than they get by clearing the debt. So members of the stability pool can actually make a profit by buying those liquidations, and it happens instantly and automatically when liquidations occur.
So this is separate from the LQTY tokens that you mentioned, right?
Yes, it's a separate piece. Yeah.
Can I compare this to anything in banking? Because we try to compare the LQTY to equity. Like how would I see? Do you think there is an analogy in normal finance?
I think the closest is probably like an insurance pool or something where people kind of provide funds in advance, and it's a bit different. It's kind of a mixture of insurance plus like, buying the collateral in advance, I think. It's hard to think of something that's identical actually in traditional finance. Because in the stability pool, they would expect to profit most of the time if the liquidated loan has like a collateral surplus. So it's like still above 100% collateral ratio. But if the ETH prices, dropped a lot and pulled that loan down below 100%, then it would actually realize a loss for those stability pool depositors who kind of automatically buy that collateral.